I'm 30 years old, and I'm sharing the house with my sister. It's a two-floor house, a mother-daughter house, meaning it has two kitchens. My sister takes the downstairs, I take the upstairs. My sister isn't home a lot because she often stays with her boyfriend who lives 20 miles away. Like I said, I'm 30. I shouldn't let being home alone ever freak me out, but admittedly, sometimes it does. This happened on a night that I was home alone in my living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house is an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one big space. My couch is in the middle of the space, so as I watch television on the couch, my back is to a large part of the room behind me. For those a little more easily spooked, it wouldn't be the most comfortable place to be sitting alone watching a scary movie. I'll admit, as I watched in the dark room with nothing but the light from the television to cancel the darkness of the room, I found myself glancing over my shoulder a lot. I like to think I'm not the only 30-year-old male that does that. But anyway, after the movie, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights in the house, then went to sleep. My sleep lasted for about 2 hours. I woke up around 1 a.m., and I wasn't sure why I woke up at first. Then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like my sister. It sounded like she was inside the house, so it's not like she was calling for me to open the door. But still, I knew it was my sister's voice. I didn't know what she was yelling up to me though, but I was still groggy and not thinking straight. All I could think was that she must have been calling for me or arguing with her boyfriend. So I got out of bed and went into the pitch black hall. I turned on the hallway lights and then made my way through the living room and heard my sister's voice again from downstairs. Now I could understand her to be saying my name. I made my way downstairs in the dark, yelling back at her, "What is it?" I looked for the light switch in the foyer downstairs but couldn't find it. I'm not lying when I say I was groggy as hell. I walked down her little hallway towards her kitchen, found a light switch, and flicked it on. The light in the kitchen lights up her little apartment, including her living room. The light starts off dim and needs time to brighten up, but I still saw that there was no one down there, not her, not her boyfriend. I went to her bedroom, but it was empty. I called her name really loudly one time. No one called back. But shortly after I yelled, I heard something drop to the floor in my sister's bedroom, which I had just checked, and it was empty. I went back up the stairs like a little kid and went back to my bed to where my phone was. I tried to call her a few times, but she didn't pick up. I had myself locked in my room, wondering if I had just hallucinated all of that. Eventually, I fell asleep, and in the morning, I woke up to text from my sister asking why I called her at 1 a.m. I asked her if she was home last night, and she told me no. She was currently staying at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to her bedroom to see what may have fallen down on the floor, but there was not a single object on the floor that could have made that noise. I'm led to believe I hallucinated everything I heard that night, but that's what I want to believe because the alternative would be much more horrific. But I've never really hallucinated anything else or had any kind of sleep disorders, so how vividly I heard my sister's voice and that sound in her room really freaks me out. I was left home alone a lot as a kid, just due to the fact that my mom was single for a good chunk of my upbringing and she worked as an RN on a crappy RN schedule. My brother went away to college. This was a night that my mom was working an overnight. It was a weekend night, so I had this girl, Molly, over who I was talking to. She hung out for a while, we watched a couple of movies and whatnot. Eventually, she had to go home because her parents don't like her out late. So I was left alone to hold down the fort. I continued to watch television in my room, in bed. My bedroom is upstairs next to the backyard. So when someone dragged one of the chairs on the deck outside, I heard it. I got up and looked out the window, and I saw someone sitting on one of the deck chairs down below. I called Molly's name, thinking it was her after all. She'd only left under 10 minutes ago. Whoever it was looked up at me, but it wasn't Molly. I immediately pulled away from the window to hide. That was not anybody I recognized, not in the darkness, at least. I texted a few close friends on our group chat, asking if it was one of them messing with me. The ones who answered all said no and asked what I was talking about. I didn't really believe any of my friends would come to my house to mess with me like that anyway. Scared shitless but still curious, I slowly walked back over to the window to look down again. That person was still sitting in the chair looking up at my window. It was a he that much was clearing he definitely saw me. I hurried away from the window again to turn off the television. I sat in my bed in a ball, basically, with my arms wrapped around my knees. I waited in darkness for a while. I didn't even want to turn my phone screen on because I was scared he'd see the light. I didn't even want to move because the window was open and I feared that he'd hear any movement I made. I wanted him to assume I was just no longer in the bedroom. I waited enough time. It had to be a solid 5 minutes of just sitting there. I highly doubted that man outside could still be there. I finally mustered up the courage to get up and look out the window. I felt a little part of me die inside when I saw he was still down there, looking up at my window. Instead of running away from the window again, I tried to be brave and said down to him, "What do you want?" I then noticed his shoulders started to go up and down as if he were laughing really hard, but he didn't make any kind of audible laughing sounds. At first, I heard a slight whistling sound coming from him. It seemed like he was laughing so hard that he was wheezing. I asked him to please go away, then walked away from the window again. I went back to my bed. I was scared to call the police for some reason. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairway, listening. The back door was being pushed. He was trying to get into the house. I ran back to my room to hide again. I was 14. I didn't know what else to do. Eventually, I heard the front door's doorknob being fiddled with and the man trying to push the front door open as well. He gave up quickly, thank God. I closed my bedroom window and curtains. If our doors weren't locked, I could have been killed easily. I was skinny and weak when I was 14 and definitely not a fighter. I didn't leave my room again that night until my mom got home around 9. I told her what happened, and her reaction was angry at me for not calling 911 -1. In hindsight, that was very stupid of Miani of the many things I did, or rather didn't do, at a young age that I question greatly. This was the story of how I almost died as a young kid home alone, possibly the most intense night of my life, with way too much going on. We're a family of 5. I was 10 at the time. My older brother was 14, and my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night. My brother was out with his friends, causing trouble clearly, because a dreaded phone call came to my parents. All I remember was that I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mom start freaking out and crying. I got really scared and hurried to see what was wrong. My mom was on the phone with the hospital, calling to inform my parents that my brother had gotten hit by a car. Obviously, we were all shaken and really scared. My brother's leg was broken, but I don't know what else was said on the phone. All I know is my parents hurried to get their coats on, got my little sister from her room, and asked me if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes, and they hurried out to the car and left. I was, of course, really worried for my brother, but I really didn't want to go to the hospital and see him in any kind of bad condition. I don't think my parents wanted me or my sister to either, but they didn't want to leave my 5-year-old sister home without them. It's worth mentioning my brother recovered just fine, as his injury is no longer relevant to the story, other than it being the reason why I was left home alone on a Friday night. Before my dad left, he was trying to calm down my mom, telling her he was going to be okay. Seeing my dad like that made me feel better. I had a feeling my mom was just being over dramatic like any mom would be. I continued playing the Star Wars game for a couple more hours when I heard the front door open. I had my bedroom door closed by this point. It was easily past midnight and past my bedtime, so I turned off the television and PlayStation and crawled into my bed with my Game Boy. I tried listening to hear my parents' voices, maybe hear if my brother was with them, or just hear what they were saying, but I didn't hear anything. After a few minutes of not hearing them even come up the stairs, I had a feeling something was wrong. I went to my door and quietly opened it, then walked over to the ledge and banister that overlooked the living room. The lights were off, but there were 3 tall people standing in my living room. They weren't my family. I was so petrified that I was frozen for a second before I could quietly walk back into my room and shut the door as quietly as I could in my trepidation. But it wasn't quiet enough, and I knew it. They had to have heard the door click shut, even if just slightly. I hurried to my closet door, opened it quietly, stepped inside, then shut the door. I had myself sitting behind a bunch of the boxes and bags of clothes that were stuffed in my closet. I was actually pretty covered from view. There was a short period that felt like forever, where I was anticipating my bedroom door opening, and it did. And at that moment, I knew I was going to die. I heard footsteps walk into the room. I couldn't tell how many people. It may have been 1, it may have been 2. I heard the footsteps move to my bed, and I heard my covers being played with. Then silence. Then more footsteps towards the closet door. Then silence for a few seconds. And then the closet door opened. My heart was in my throat by this point. All I did was sit quietly and hold my breath. The door was open for a really long time, but I didn't look up. I didn't move. It had to be a good 20 seconds of silence before the door closed again. Footsteps walked away from the door, then out of the room. I finally looked up and I just realized, from where I was crouched down behind the bags and boxes, I may have been visible to that person. It wasn't until probably an hour later that I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to them. The front door was left ajar by the people who broke in, and they had stolen a number of valuables from our house. It was a night that just went from bad to worse for our family. My parents were in such a rush when they left for the hospital that they apparently didn't even lock the door. I was lucky to have not been killed or kidnapped. I look back now and really wonder if the person who opened the closet and just stood there for 20 seconds saw me hiding in there. Maybe he was just a guy that came to rob a house, not to kidnap or hurt a child. Or maybe he just didn't see me, and I just narrowly escaped death or injury. I was home alone for an entire week one time when I was still a teenager living with my parents, which was a rare occasion since my parents didn't go out a lot. My mom's rich friend, Patty, invited my parents on a trip that she was paying for. I'm an only child, so I was left alone in the house. We lived in Newark, Ohio, which is in Licking County. Yes, our county was actually called Licking County. My parents' old house had woods in the backyard and was on some quiet road that only a few cars would pass per day usually. We had a huge deck in the backyard overlooking the woods and a decently large backyard. We even had a little fish pond and an above-ground swimming pool. This was on a Thursday night, I remember, because I had conversations with friends about plans for the weekend that day. This was in July of 2013. I was out on the deck, smoking weed with my speaker, playing music. That's about the time it started. I thought I heard a voice from out in the woods. I lowered the music and listened for a little bit. It didn't repeat, so I raised it back up. When the music was loud again, I heard a voice from out in the woods again. This time, I turned the music off completely and listened for longer. There was a voice calling from the woods again, confirming I wasn't just hearing Thingsamel's voice saying, "Hey, over here." He was kind of distant, but not too far. The woods were anywhere from 20 to 30 yards away from the deck, and that's where the voice was coming from. I didn't think in a million years it was someone calling out for me though. Rather, maybe just some kids playing manhunt or something. The voice called out again, "Hey, over here, we need help." This time I realized the voice was too deep to be a kid, and when a voice yells out, "We need help," obviously that'll always be slightly concerning. I was getting a little bit uncomfortable now because now I was questioning if these yells were directed at me. Now I heard the voice yell, "Straight in front of you, please come help us." And the voice was coming from straight in front of me in the woods. Now I had a feeling this was directed at me. I reluctantly called back, "Who is that?" And they responded, "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." I called back, "What does that mean?" Then the voice replied back, "Just please come help. Straight in front of you." I got up from my seat, walked down the steps of the deck onto the grass, and proceeded towards the woods. I called out, "I'm coming. Where are you?" The voice replied instantly, "Right in front of you. I see you." I replied back, "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" There was no answer this time. I stopped in my tracks about halfway towards the woods. I had a bad feeling in my gut about this. I started walking backwards back towards the house and the deck. I didn't even want to turn my back to the woods because it took me that long to realize there was something very suspicious about this situation. I made it back to the deck and the voice didn't say anything else. If they truly saw me and this was real, they would have said something like, "Where are you going?" At the very least. They knew I was onto the situation, but who even knows how many people were in there? Could have been one, could have been three. All I know is getting stuck in the woods makes absolutely no sense, especially if he or they were able to literally see me. Like, what did their shirt get caught on a branch? I went inside the house and locked all the doors just to be safe. I chilled in my living room for a bit, still high, and I think that's why I was more trusting at first, because of how high and relaxed I was. Then, though I heard the voice again from outside, closer now, definitely in the backyard and not the woods anymore. I heard splashing of water. It could have been the pool or the pond. I hurried to the window to see. I didn't see anyone at first, but then the voice called, "I see you," with a laugh. I noticed him. It was one guy, at least one guy visible. He was hidden behind the pool on the other side, and I could only see his head. It was just too dark to make out anything besides his dark medium-length hair. I closed the blinds and tried to ignore it. Maybe he'd lose interest if he saw I wasn't entertaining him. He was probably a sick, deranged person who enjoyed messing with people, so I didn't want to give him what he wanted. But my breaking point was when there was a horrible, aggressive banging on the window where I had just closed the blinds, and on the other side, the guy was screaming, "Help!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "Fuck off, you freak! The police are coming!" I screamed it over and over, trying to make myself sound crazier than him. I heard him start to laugh on the other side of the glass. His laughing started to fade away as I assumed he walked away. I sat back down on the couch, trembling, shaking, out of breath. I sat there for a while, and it seemed like the guy had really given up. I still got a good night's sleep that night because weed helps me sleep. I wonder if I would have handled that situation any differently if I wasn't high, though. The situation made me more paranoid about who I opened my door to. I've owned and lived in the same house for 8 years. It's a normal family-sized home, which was relevant when I had roommates. But when they moved out and it just became me living here, I had nothing to do with the extra space. It was technically a 4-bedroom house, but I only used 2 of the bedrooms. One is my main bedroom and one is the game room. The other 2 rooms were on the far end of the upstairs hallway. One had a few storage boxes in it and the other was completely empty. After getting out of work at 9:00, I picked up Wendy's on the way home and pretty much went right to the game room. I was off tomorrow, so what better to do than game all night? I put my headphones on and loaded up Cody. But before I had time to even load into a match, I thought I heard something that sounded like a knock at the front door. I took my headset off and listened, but not hearing anything and figuring they would have knocked again if there was someone there, I went back to my game. Probably a whole 2 hours went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like either a knock or a door closing or something like that. But with my headphones on and with my room door closed, it was way too quiet for me to tell. I got up and opened the door, looking out into the hallway and waiting for that sound to come again. After a minute though, I went downstairs and looked out the front door. Nobody was outside my house, and everything seemed normal. Having been hearing these sounds though, I obviously made sure the door was locked before going back upstairs. To be a bit more cautious, I left my room door open this time, so if it happened again, maybe I'd hear it better. I put my headset back on and continued gaming. I played through a whole round, so like 20 minutes. As the game ended and I leaned back in my chair, a figure rushed past the open doorway, just off to the side of my view. I immediately threw my headphones off and jumped from my chair, horrified and unsure what to do. I just stared at the doorway. I didn't get the courage to finally move for several minutes. When I looked into the hallway though, and eventually the rest of the house, nobody was there. But the front door was unlocked again. When police came and investigated, it was clear that the person had been hiding and very likely living in the empty room. I hadn't been in there for weeks or maybe even months, so all this time they could have been just on the other side of the wall from me, and I had no idea. It's really scary to think about, especially if I'd happened to confront him. There's no saying what he would have done. This happened to me just a bit over a year ago. I'm 24 and have a townhouse in the suburbs. I live alone, which for me gets really boring, so I try to have friends over whenever I can. My closest friends come a couple of times a week and sometimes even sleep over to escape their parents' houses. I didn't have any plans this night, but I had plans for the next day with my friend Sarah, who was supposed to be coming over to have a movie night. So I really was just trying to get this night over with and looking forward to the next day. I went to bed early, like 9:15. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I looked at my nightstand and saw it was 2 a.m., but the way I woke up was odd. My heart was pounding for some reason, and my brain was very alert and aware, like something was happening. I thought maybe I had just woken up from a nightmare or something until I heard a click from downstairs. I sat up, a door slowly screeched open, and I could hear someone's footsteps entering my home. Although terrified, I thought this had to be Sarah or one of my other friends, as they all had keys to my house in case they needed somewhere to stay. I got up from my bed and walked over to the door, opening it and stepping into the hallway. Sarah? No one responded. I waited in the hallway for what felt like forever, but then a bright light suddenly flickered on, lighting up the whole downstairs. A second later, soft chattering noise came from the living room. Whoever it was had turned on the television. For a moment, I felt relief, thinking it was definitely one of my friends who had one too many drinks. I went down the stairs and into the living room and felt my whole body turn ice cold in an instant. Some random man was sitting on my couch looking at the television screen. He looked maybe 50 years old, with patchy long black hair and dirty clothes. As I stared at him in fear, he glanced over at me and showed a crooked smile, then waved his hand as if to invite me over to the couch. I turned around and sprinted right out the front door. I banged on my neighbor's door until they let me in and called the police. By the time they made it though, he was gone, no trace of him at all. What's worse is, the police didn't take it all that seriously, suggesting it was probably just some harmless homeless man wanting a place to sleep. The way I see it, everything points to otherwise. He picked the lock on my door, sat on my couch, and turned on the television. Then the sick man smiled at me and invited me over to the couch. I think he may have been a stalker or something. And now I find it hard to even sleep at night when I'm alone, thinking that there's a chance that I'm not really alone.